with the scent of potpourri, films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a movie and TV podcast that covers a specific topic, be it genre, trope, movie, or show each episode. You can find more of our work at ObsessiveViewer.com, and while every episode will always be free, if you'd like to support what we do here, you can become a patron at patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer for tons and tons and tons of bonus audio content, including TV and book reviews, immediate reaction movie reviews, Patreon potpourri episodes, movie commentary tracks, and much more. Recently on Patreon, I've been doing an ongoing series where every Sunday I review part of a Stephen King novel, and it's all in the lead up to his new release, Holly, in September. So I've been doing the Bill Hodges trilogy. I just finished that last week, and now I'm moving on to The Outsider, which also features Holly Gibney, and then from there I'm going to do all the novellas in the If It Bleeds collection, and then I'm going to do a series of reviews on Holly in September. So in addition to that, I do immediate reaction recordings in the car after I see a movie in the theater, and I do a lot of other crap on there too. So again, check that out. Patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find me on social media, including Letterboxd at ObsessiveViewer. And today on the show, we're going to be reviewing Oppenheimer by Christopher Nolan, which is now in theaters. It's opening in theaters this weekend. And joining me today is, of course, my co-host of 10 years, whose Letterboxd is letterboxd.com/ObsessiveTiny. It is Tiny. Did I already say my co-host Tiny? Tiny.
Yeah, Tiny, that's me. Hey, how's it going?
How is it going with you? I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks.
Good. We did a pretty lengthy Patreon recording where you divulged to me that you almost got frostbite in July in Indianapolis. So that's an interesting, riveting story that you can find on Patreon. What have you been up to in terms of movies and TV and stuff in since we've last recorded Obsessive Viewer? It's been a while since we recorded an Obsessive Viewer episode together.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I've been on a strange war movie kick lately for no apparent reason, so I've watched a handful of those. I also just yesterday, I think, finished the latest season of Black Mirror.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I finished that. Good season, good slate of episodes. I enjoyed them. Nothing mind blowing, I don't think, like past seasons, but good for sure.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I've been on lately.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm eager to find out what you thought about in more depth about Black Mirror. We can talk off mic and everything, but to plug the Patreon again, I did do an immediate reaction for all those episodes, and I'm going to be covering the season on Anthology, which is back. I finished season 3 of The Twilight Zone on Anthology, and so now I'm going to do a bonus episode series on Black Mirror and then move on to season 4, so I'm very excited about that. But again, on Patreon, I did immediate reactions for, Black Mirror season 5.
Nice.
Yeah. What other war movies have you watched? And have you revisited, Dunkirk by chance?
I haven't, but I really should, because I think I've only seen it the one time. I talked about like Black Hawk Down, Lone Survivor, American Sniper, and I watched that 13 Hours movie, which isn't not necessarily war, but shoot 'em up kind of battle. I think that's it. That's it. So,
do you think you'll revisit 1917? Because I know that was your movie of the year that year.
Again, I should, because it's been a while. I might. I don't know. I don't know if the kick is going to go on that long. We will see.
Very nice.
But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It's a good question.
Sweet. Thank you. It's the only kind I have. But Here's another one at you. How are babies made? No, I'm kidding. But but no, other things before we get into the review and everything. I've been making TikToks, Tiny.
I have been enjoying them. I think
nice, thank you.
I think you fell into the medium pretty well, or like you've adapted the trends of the medium pretty well. Like, I'm kind of impressed.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was not fishing for that because I am in stark disagreement with you. But but no, it's been fun. It is literally like, so here's the test. If you are listening to this episode because you saw one of my TikToks and that was the first time that you like were made aware of Obsessive Viewer podcasts, like, let me know, like, message me, like, DM me on TikTok, or message me on Twitter, or wherever you find me. Email me, matt@obsessiveviewer.com, and just let me know, because I'm curious if that is going to be beneficial for listenership or anything. But it's an avenue of social media that I have just gotten more and more familiar with as was noted in a Patreon recording some time ago. We're both TikTok boys, Tiny. And
yep.
So I've been browsing TikTok and I'm like, yeah, I can throw my opinions out there and everything. And then, I figured, might as well do that and throw the logos up at the end of each video. and yeah, hope for more listeners and everything. But it's been very fun. It's been very interesting. And it's since it's a time limit thing, it's relatively low effort for me. Like, I know that people on TikTok put a lot of work into their TikToks. But me, it's more of a free flowing kind of thing. So
gotcha.
So yeah.
That's why I haven't embraced it as much. Like, I've done a few TikToks, but like, it's just like editing video for me. It's not my thing. Like, it's just too much. And
well, it's interesting because like the user interface makes it pretty easy at a base level. Like, there are people that do like wild things with their stuff, and I'm just like, I have no idea. I don't know what you're doing, but I can put the cover art for a book that I read in the background of my TikTok and talk about it. So, yeah.
Well, I'm enjoying them, so.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you're on TikTok, follow me. It's OV Podcasts is the username. The funny story about that is because it's OV Podcasts because I had previously signed up with Obsessive Viewer as the username, and then I did not know how to sign back into that account. So I went ahead and did OV Podcasts. So it's been fun. It's been fun. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Other than that, nothing else going on or anything. Do you want to get into our review of Oppenheimer?
Yes, sir. Let's go.
Okay, awesome. So like we usually do, we're going to be doing a review of the movie. This episode's review is obviously of Oppenheimer, which is coming out this weekend, directed by Christopher Nolan. The format, of course, is going to be a non-spoiler review, and then we're going to jump to a spoiler section, which is we're going to note when we're going to go into spoilers. There are timestamps in the show notes to find all the information and everything. Those show notes can also be found at obsessiveviewer.com/OV395. And so let's go ahead and get into our non-spoiler review of Oppenheimer. And to get us kicked off, going to kind of give a preliminary information. Oppenheimer opens this weekend nationwide. We saw it at a promo and press screening last night at the Indiana State Museum on 70 millimeter film. Biggest theater in the state, biggest screen in the state. It is one of 30 theaters in the U.S. that is capable of screening this in 70 millimeter film.
In the world.
In the world, yes, in the world. Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm actually Facebook friends with the projectionist there, and Yeah, and I mean, just the projection is amazing. So the premise, according to IMDb, is the story of American scientist J. Robert Oppenheimer and his role in the development of the atomic bomb. Again, this was directed by Christopher Nolan. Writer was Christopher Nolan, based on the book American Prometheus by Kai Bird and Martin Sherwin. And the cast includes Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Alden Ehrenreich, Florence Pugh, Josh Hartnett, and pretty much any other actor working today. It is a very stacked supporting cast. So Tiny, as we get into the review, first, just a brief overview. Where do you stand with Christopher Nolan's work now in the lead up to seeing Oppenheimer? Where do you stand? Where do you stand with Christopher Nolan, especially in regards to his recent work like Tenet and Interstellar and Dunkirk?
He's one of my favorite filmmakers. He still is. He has been for years. I think I think there are absolutely fair criticisms to be levied at him as a filmmaker, as a writer, especially. But I feel like he just packs such a punch and has such a distinct style that just really speaks to me. I feel like his flaws just don't bother me that much. It's, kind of that's just my opinion, and I understand why those things bother other people. But I just think he's an incredible filmmaker. I love his dedication to practical filmmaking. I think CGI is a great tool for filmmaking. It's given us phenomenal movies, but it can also be a really big crutch and can be used poorly and overdone. And the fact that he's dedicated to the practical side of it and literally never uses it as a crutch. I just really respect that about him as a filmmaker. It's been part of I don't know if it's part of the marketing, but it came out that there's like not even 1 second of CGI in Oppenheimer, which is just astounding in this day and age. So yeah, I just really respect him as a filmmaker, as a visionary, as a storyteller. Just what he can do with the camera. I just really love.
Interesting. Well said. For me, and what did you think of Tenet? His last film.
So Ben and his friend and I were talking about that last night. It's, I think it's certainly a flawed movie. I mean, it's very flawed. I think it's very possible for people to enjoy that movie.
Sure.
Which is such a horrible way to start, but I think if you can see it a couple times and the first time you watch it, don't try to understand it, just kind of go along for the ride. I think you can have a good time with it. You can get something out of it. You can find really cool things to latch onto in that movie. And it can be fascinating because I've watched it 3 times at this point.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and I mean, I will defend it to an extent, but again, there are people who want to see a movie once and that's it, and they want certain things out of it, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And Tenet is not that movie, and it's borderline. It borderline can't be comprehended, that movie. I mean, I don't know that it's a matter of intelligence with that movie. I think it's not like, oh, because you don't get it because you're dumb. No, it's right. You don't get it because it's not a linear. It doesn't fit human thought patterns. Like that's the kind of movie it is. I think it's super. It's a super one of a kind movie, though. I'll say that it's. I'm a fan of it, and I will attempt to defend it.
That's a really interesting way to frame it, which I'll talk more in depth about just my overview of Nolan. But with Tenet, I saw it once, and that was under severe circumstances. It came out, like, I saw it digitally. at home in December of 2020 while I was symptomatic with COVID, like pre-vaccine
Right.
COVID. Had like a very high fever and just like basic, symptoms and everything. So I admit I was not in the right frame of mind to watch this movie at all. But I also didn't really care for it that much. The set pieces were really interesting. The concept on the surface is right up my alley. Like, just like inverted time is interesting to me. But it fell down to a lot, or it came down a lot to Nolan's his tendency to just kind of at times over explain things, but also there are times in this movie where like I can't remember the actress's name. She was in 127 Hours briefly, but anyway, French actress. But anyway, where she says like, don't try to think about it or don't try to understand. It's like, okay, that's a little bit of a cop out there, Nolan.
Right.
Yeah, like if you can divorce yourself from that, more power to you. But I kind of think that it's a little bit, I don't know. I need to revisit it, but there's a reason why I haven't bothered to revisit it.
That's totally valid, dude.
Yeah.
Like and like I'm not going to defend it to the point where I care that much. Like I mean it's
right.
I totally get it. It is a weird movie, and it's full of the classic Chris Nolan exposition dumps because it has to be.
Yeah.
And I think I'll say that the way I used to defend his exposition dumps is that he creates such complex worlds and uses such complex ideas that you don't have a choice, which is partially true. But at the same time, I think a movie like Interstellar that's only sort of science fiction, like it's based on a lot of fact, that movie's still packed with exposition, and it's not creating a vastly wild, distant world. Like it's just in the future a little bit, and like it's in the near future. You know what I mean? It's nothing. It's not some crazy universe with crazy physics bending concepts like Inception or Tenet. It's just space travel, which shouldn't be so exposition heavy. And so I think, again, those criticisms are totally valid. And I think I'm not a writer, so I don't know how to correct that. I wouldn't even try, but I'm sure I think he can find a way to make a movie that's not so exposition heavy. He did it with Oppenheimer, so we're going to talk about it. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We'll talk about that. The other thing I want to say, just overview of Nolan. I mean, he is he has long been one of my favorite filmmakers, even though I wasn't too keen on Interstellar or Tenet. Dunkirk was kind of, I saw it once in the theater and I haven't revisited it. But I still have a great deal of appreciation for just what he does, like in each movie. Like it's very unique. Those trademarks that he has are very, very of his toolkit and everything. Yeah, so we'll get into Oppenheimer here shortly. I just want to say that I did write a review on obsessiveviewer.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. And everything. So, Tiny, Oppenheimer, non-spoilers. I do want to say real quick, to go back to the TikTok conversation, I did find a very funny TikTok, that, let me find what the username is, because I'm going to play the audio of it. It's like a sketch where it uses AI animation, which is scary, very scary to me. But the username is Luke_Strickler. So this is his TikTok. I'm going to play the audio of it. So here we go.
I'm at a pre-screening for Oppenheimer, and the intro was insane.
I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. Just kidding. I'm Cillian Murphy, and I play J. Robert Oppenheimer in this summer flick, Oppenheimer.
And I'm Christopher Bombhead. I play the atomic bomb.
Thanks for seeing this movie on the big screen.
And remember, man wasn't meant to play God.
Except at the movies.
And at that point, it shows Oppenheimer based on a fucking true story. So I don't know. I got a huge kick out of that. But anyway, let's talk about Oppenheimer. It does bother me that they mispronounce his name. It's Cillian Murphy. But yeah. But anyway, non-spoilers. What did you think about Oppenheimer?
I was spellbound by this movie, really. Oddly enough, I kind of made a parallel with the movie Lincoln from, was that 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago?
Yeah.
And the connection that I have to that movie, the connection I made between the two, is from a filmmaking standpoint. I am amazed by a movie that can be 90+% of just people talking to each other. Like, there's not action, there's not major set pieces necessarily. It's dialogue driven. And when a movie can do that, and I can't take my eyes off of it, like I am just edge of my seat enthralled. Lincoln did that however many years ago. That I can't remember what that was, like 2016 or something like that. Maybe older than that.
Or no, I think it was 2012.
Yeah, that's right. I think it was older than that. Yeah, maybe 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Lincoln did that, and Oppenheimer achieved that as well. I was just astounded by that. So the performances are all top notch. There were no weak links in the performances in this movie. So many things were on point, all the costuming. And the one thing that surprised me, this isn't a spoiler, but there weren't huge set pieces like Christopher Nolan's kind of famous for.
Yeah.
Which is kind of surprising. But I think it fits. Like, I think it fits the movie. Like, what I don't know that there's anything that needed to be a big set piece. You know what I mean? Like, what could you have added in there? I mean, we'll talk about it more in spoilers, but yeah, I don't know. I think that could maybe be not necessarily a criticism, but Nolan fans may have missed that and wanted more of that, I guess, maybe. But it didn't bother me. I'll say that. So.
Absolutely. Something I found really interesting about this movie is, I mean, there is obviously the one big selling, like, big set piece that pretty obvious, like what the movie is. But what I found pretty captivating about this movie is that it's a World War II movie, and there is not a single frame of this movie depicting World War II. It is all stateside. It's all the Manhattan Project. It is all of that. And the way that Nolan is able to make the, obviously the conflict of World War II and make that be the impetus for everything that goes into making this weapon to end all wars. In the way that he makes that feeling of the world literally at war, the way that he makes that shine through in the finished product without showing a single frame of fighting, of actual warfare, is very commendable to his ability to just tell this story the way that he wanted to tell it. And it's a very unique way of telling it, which is to its detriment and to its benefit in varying degrees, which I'll talk about in more detail. But any other overview thoughts, or do you want me to give mine?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I loved this movie. It was phenomenal. I have been on a hot and cold streak with Christopher Nolan recently. I need to revisit Interstellar at some point, but I was very harsh to that movie. I was very down on it for various reasons, and without revisiting it, I still stand by those reasons. But even with like Tenet, I wasn't engaged with it. And even to a much lesser degree, Dunkirk just felt like it didn't grip me. I have not been like grabbed by a Nolan movie, I don't think, since The Dark Knight Rises, which a lot of people say is the worst of the Dark Knight trilogy. And I think it's perfectly above average and even great to an extent. But with Oppenheimer, there are things in this movie that I've never seen in a Christopher Nolan movie. And that is incredibly refreshing because, as we've talked about and as has been stated, that he has such an almost dependency on dumbing down dialogue in order to communicate to the audience what's going on. And that is oftentimes, to me, something that detracts greatly from the movie. Even in like one of my favorite movies of all time, Inception, like the example that I gave to you when we were talking outside of the movie is that like there are scenes in that movie that like so much of the dialogue is literally like two characters explaining something specifically for the audience's benefit. And because of that, the dialogue just feels a little bit bland. Like there's that one scene where Ariadne is with Cobb, and he's shooting at the projections as they're kind of swarming the place where they need to get Cillian Murphy into the vault and everything, and Ariadne is like, "Oh, are you killing them? Are you killing parts of his brain?" And he's just like, "No, it's just projections." It's like, we don't need that. Like we don't need that at all. That's strictly for our benefit. But here with Oppenheimer, I think mostly it could be because it's a biography, it's a biopic, it's a true story, or maybe it's just it's growth on his part as a screenwriter. But there are so many just very nuanced touches to the screenplay and like little moments here and there, and the dialogue has a lot of subtlety and subtext that communicates so much without having to say or do very much. And in those character beats and the way that it informs the greater narrative and everything, I think it just shines. It is like you had mentioned outside of the theater that you think it's his best written movie, and I wholeheartedly agree. I think that it shows just it's something that we haven't seen from Nolan, and I think that that's really refreshing. And then elsewhere, I mean, I had some issues with the structure of the movie. Most notably, it takes about 20 to 30 minutes before like it clicked together. Like I didn't understand what the different timelines were, to the point where I was just like, okay, I feel like Nolan just wanted to make a nonlinear thing because that's Nolan's thing. He wants to do nonlinear storytelling, which I'm a fan of. But when we have two concurrent timelines and it's not very clear what the purpose of each is from the outset, and one of them is hampered by flashbacks to like his experience, like to Oppenheimer's experience in like academia and everything, that just muddies the waters too much. And that was a bit of a detriment, but about half an hour in, it clicked together, and it was kind of smooth sailing from there for me. And the final thing I'll say, in kind of non-spoilers, and then we can kind of actually talk about it instead of me just talking at you, is that the visual effects, like it is, the practical effects are incredible. The one big like money shot scene of the test you have to see it. Like you have to see it. It's incredible. But there are moments throughout the movie where there is a level to which Nolan goes into the psyche of Oppenheimer through these visuals of these different like molecular, like atom smashing sequences that are very brief. Kind of reminds me a little bit of, and this might be me just thinking about like practical effects and everything, but it reminds me a little bit of like what Aronofsky did with The Fountain, like having these just very abstract visual representations of these weird, crazy things. And And what Nolan does here is he uses those types of like that template of these atomic level movements to just show how the decisions and how the work that Oppenheimer did weighs on his conscience. And as the movie progresses, that becomes that becomes represented in the like outside of Oppenheimer. Like there are scenes where he's in the real world and things are happening that is just, it's showing some crazy stuff. And what I love is that is a subtle touch in the grand scheme of things, because this is a 3-hour movie and there's like 2 scenes of that. And it just really, really accentuates exactly what Nolan is trying to say with it, which we'll talk more in spoilers about it. But I just think that visually and technically and writingly, this is a very impressive movie by Christopher Nolan.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Well said. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. What was I gonna tackle first? I forget. Yeah, I think you mentioned early on that you had a bit of issue with the structure of it.
Yeah.
And I agree, especially early on. Like it's the whole Strauss timeline stuff, storyline, it's so disconnected from what we're seeing with Oppenheimer. It's like, okay, how does this even, first of all, what are we doing? Like, what is this? Like, why are we following this guy? And obviously he's linked to Oppenheimer some way, but we don't know how, and we don't know why. This is clearly in the future later on from what we're experiencing with Oppenheimer right now in his sort of, youth academia years. It's you can't link the two, and it is jarring. And then there's some other scenes later on where there's kind of debate and discussion going on kind of in a back room around around literal round table of scientists debating something. And while you understand why the debate is relevant, it's there's a lot of confusion about the timeline. It's like, okay, when I think the earliest that we see as far as the year is probably in the 19 teens, maybe, when Oppenheimer's young. I don't know, maybe even earlier than that. But then and it goes all the way into the like 60s, maybe. I don't know, but it's so obviously there's a lot of jumping around and a lot of movement. Obviously, a lot of it is between 1942 and 1945. Obviously, that's when the Manhattan Project was going. But and I think once they get into that, once they get into the Los Alamos, I think that's where structurally the movie was in its best groove, because it's like, okay, this is the core, and we can understand this is the core story. We can get flashbacks, we can get the future Strauss stuff, and it all works together pretty well, and actually really well. It's pretty graspable. But that is for me, that's like just about the only flaw that I could really see in the movie. And frankly, with such a detailed biopic and such a practice of leaving no stone unturned in this biopic, I think you're going to have some muddling. Like, I think that's going to happen. But I still think, and again, it's the fact that it's unconventional, I think, is so great. It's such a great way to tell the story. I think, like, it was such a brilliant way to tell the story, but it unfortunately led to early structural issues that made it difficult to grasp right away. So,
yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that in terms of those structural issues at the beginning, like it's pretty clearly, like from the outset, there are two kind of concurrent timelines going. There is Oppenheimer being in this room with a panel of people that he is giving a testimony to. And then you have Strauss, played by Robert Downey Jr., and in kind of gorgeous black and white photography, who is sitting in front of a congressional hearing. And in my review, I had mentioned that Oppenheimer's portion of the movie in this part is he is looking to get his security clearance renewed, and Strauss is being he's being considered. It's a confirmation hearing for a cabinet position, and I kind of hesitated to put that in my review because from my memory, we don't know that that's the case until like the third act of the movie. And this is a 3-hour movie. So that was a little bit frustrating to me. And even then, like, it's not until like very late in the movie that I began to even care about Strauss's whole arc in those congressional hearings. It ties together really well, which we'll talk about in the spoilers, but it is a very, very steep uphill climb to really be engaged with it when the movie is so densely packed with so much information, so many things happening at every given time that it's kind of incongruous to what I said before in that the movie, it's refreshing that Nolan doesn't hold the audience's hand or doesn't have to dumb down anything or make it presentable to a mass audience. And I think part of my theory is because he doesn't use like that like heavy exposition dialogue that he does in so many other movies, because this is nonfiction. This is based on true events and everything, and it's not this high concept sci-fi or high concept idea that he feels that he needs to over explain. It's just a more grounded and realistic, steeped in realism and true life story. And so that I think is a really good thing for the movie, but it's in that structure, that nonlinear structure, where it kind of loses itself a little bit for me. And some things and even some like whole subplots kind of fall by the wayside, which I'll talk about briefly in a moment. But it kind of made that's like my one main criticism is that I wish that it was, at least in that first act, I wish that it was a little bit more straightforward, and I wish that there was a little bit more heavy lifting to explain like what is going on, because as soon as we're introduced to it, like the opening of the movie is concurrent shots of Oppenheimer at his hearing and Strauss at his hearing, and like it says like 1, fission, and 2, fusion, like these little title cards that come up, and I don't know why that is. Like, I don't know what delineates those. I
had forgotten about that.
Yeah. That's
funny. Yeah, that's odd. Like, I don't understand necessarily. There's probably some cute scientific link to that, but I don't know. Yeah, that was a little goofy. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of, this might be like, I think this might honestly be a freaking Jeff Foxworthy joke, which is showing my upbringing, really, because I heard this when I was a kid. But it might even be just Jesus, like even like Larry the Cable Guy. But anyway, geniuses of comedy, they like there's a joke that's like, yeah, my like, you know, small town library or whatever has two sections. There's fission and non-fission. Like fission because, yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, it's dumb, but anyway, but yeah. So I didn't know what those titles how that was supposed to play out. I think that there is probably. We'll talk more about that in spoilers, because I think that by the end, those two concurrent timelines like really piece together really well, I think. But in those opening moments, like I said, it starts with that. And then like as soon as like we're introduced to Oppenheimer in this setting, and then he has to give his testimony, like a prepared statement where he explains like what like how he got back to America from after studying abroad or whatever. And it's just a rapid succession of like flashbacks to, okay, he's in a classroom. Okay, he's meeting Florence Pugh. Okay, he's doing this, he's doing that. And it's just like, I'm like, slow down. Like, we've got 3 hours. Like, maybe, make this, like, don't short shrift this part of the movie, like, right off the bat. But like you said, once the Manhattan Project started properly and everything, I mentally in the theater, I was like, okay, Matt Damon is here. He's telling him that he's going to be appointed to head up the Manhattan Project. It's go time. This is where the movie's getting into its groove. So, yeah. Yeah.
I was also, one thing I wanted to talk about was the sort of the depiction of the science. Because we talked earlier about the concept of exposition and how Nolan uses it as a crutch, like undeniably. I was expecting some of that in this movie because we're talking about quantum physics. I mean, it's some of the most complex science known to man. But I was so pleased with the fact that this movie has very little of that. And I feel like a lot of the depiction of science, or at least the explanation of it, was almost like poetic. And like there's a moment where Emily Blunt's character is asking him, she's like, so she's kind of like, she doesn't say this, but she's like, what is quantum physics, or how would you explain it? And he has this like very poetic explanation of, all this glass and the liquid in it and this furniture and even our bodies are mostly made up of space, and they're connected by this energy that we can't explain, and this energy prevents our bodies from going through each other, and they touch hands, and it has this romantic side to it, but it explains quantum physics, or at least gives you the layman version of it without shitty exposition or making you feel like an idiot, and there's other examples of that. There's a point like where the Alvarez scientist like goes and splits the atom, I think, or he recreates the experiment of the splitting of the atom, and he's showing them on a screen, and Oppenheimer and Lawrence both have the same revelation at the same time, like, you're thinking what I'm thinking, and Alvarez is like, no, what are you thinking? And he just says a bomb. And again, that's not shitty exposition. That's like a natural. That's like a natural conversation that a person would have, as opposed to no, they're just projections. I'm not actually killing parts of his brain. They're just it's natural. It feels right. And
it's like real life dialogue. It's not. It's not like Anne Hathaway telling Matthew McConaughey, like, what if it's not science? What if it's love? What if love is binding us together? Like, okay, that's a leap there, man.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, totally.
But I love Interstellar, but yeah, you're right.
But that description of quantum physics or quantum mechanics or whatever, the way, like, I'm eager to see it again for a multitude of reasons, but not mostly, but one of those reasons is the dialogue in that scene. Cause like the way that he says it is like, the space between like these atoms and molecules and stuff are working to convince us that we are that they're solid matter, and it's preventing us from like just going through each other. And I'm just like, that is awesome. Like, that is just so like you said, poetic and romantic, and it's good. It's very good. Yeah. One of my major sticking points with this movie, aside from the opening 20 or 30 minutes kind of discombobulation of the narrative and everything, is Florence Pugh. And we'll talk more in spoilers, but I love Florence Pugh, and I think her performance is fantastic. And I said in my review, like, she is time and time again proving to be like one of the most interesting and talented actresses working today, and this is also just another notch on her belt there. What I didn't really like was that I felt like if there was one subplot in the movie that got the short shrift, that got shortchanged in some way, I feel like Florence Pugh's storyline as this young woman that Oppenheimer has an affair with, I feel like that didn't get enough of a due to really sell the full arc by the end of the movie. Which again, we'll talk about in spoilers, but how did you feel about Florence Pugh and the character of Jean.
Yeah, I thought the character and her relation to Oppenheimer was very just muddled again. I guess that's the correct way to put it. Like I think there's obviously her character is highly intelligent just like he is, and I feel like they were both I don't know. It's like there's some academic idea that they don't actually believe in love, and they have this. They just have this mechanical attraction to each other or something, and that's what they base their relationship on. But I maybe that's reaching. I have no clue. It is a muddled relationship in the movie, the way it's depicted, and I feel like her character was there to primarily just kind of bounce off of Oppenheimer and be a springboard for his a springboard for drama in his life, as opposed to a reciprocity or a give and take. I feel like she could have been developed more, and because obviously, well, not obviously, but I'm sure this woman in real life was a huge part of Oppenheimer's life.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't read the book, but yeah, I don't know. I agree. I think it was odd, and it's hard to critique it because she was so good. Like you said, she's so good, but and I need to see it again because there's so many moving parts in this movie. But yeah, I think I could maybe refine how I feel about that character and how it related to the story if I see it again. But I think there's some issues there. I think there's some just the fact that she's a little bit dropped. The character is a little bit dropped, and it's not clear just how relevant she was in his life. And yeah. I took issue with it as well.
Nice. Yeah. And like I said, we'll talk more in spoilers because we'll have to dance around it a little bit. But I feel like
for sure,
the way that her arc kind of is implemented in the movie is it's the end of it. It kind of ties into like how it affects the marriage of Oppenheimer and his wife Kitty, played by Emily Blunt, that's great. That I like that ties together. I like that is used to kind of really much shine a light on the personal life and the personal relationships that Oppenheimer had in this movie. And I think that adds a depth and dimension to the character portrait overall of the overall movie. But I also just feel like we get such infrequent scenes with Florence Pugh and Cillian Murphy. And in fact, off the top of my head, I don't believe that there is a scene with Florence Pugh and another actor in this movie. I think that it's only her and Cillian Murphy. Except for the first scene, probably.
Right. She's talking about the Chevalier character a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. But from there...
I think you're right, though.
Yeah. And it's kind of... It's a little frustrating because the movie gets to a point where we need to believe... And to an extent, I did believe that there was some degree of connection between the two, but I feel like that should have been fleshed out more before the way that it ties into the overall storyline.
Sure.
Which, yeah. So we can talk more on spoilers and everything. Yeah. Anything else in spoilers? What did you think of Emily Blunt and the rest of the supporting cast if you have a few hours?
God, everybody was just so good. Emily Blunt, probably one of the best I've seen her. She was great. Not just a supporting character, not just like a wife, stay-at-home wife in the background, but a very prominent part of this story. One of the standouts that really surprised me was David Krumholtz.
Yeah,
I think I've had a high opinion of him as an actor, anyways, but I don't know that I've seen him really do drama like this. Like I've seen him in comedy, exclusively, I think. And he was fantastic. I mean, just with absolute heavyweight actors like Matt Damon and Cillian Murphy and, all these people, Robert Downey Jr. I mean, and he's holding his own. He has such a great character and really makes it his own. I loved his physical mannerisms in this movie. So David Krumholtz was fantastic. Matt Damon was just perfect casting for that character, like the military character. Like it's not an overly complex character. It maybe sounds like a put down, but Matt Damon is kind of perfect for that. Like he can play complex characters for sure, but I'm just saying I think he really just shined. I liked he's very good at delivering dry comedy. Yes. Like the kind of the situational or like the give and take kind of comedy that's in this movie and the dialogue. I think the stuff that Christopher Nolan's kind of famous for, comic relief. He's perfect for that, and he did a great job. So I mean, everybody was so good. Josh Hartnett having a bit of a renaissance, comeback right now.
Oh my god! After seeing him in Black Mirror and now this, I'm just like, because I had either forgotten or did not realize that he was in this movie, and like when he popped up, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, this is good because I mean I was a huge fan of his in the late 90s, early aughts during the kind of slasher teen slasher thing. I mean, The Faculty. I mean, come on,
The Faculty, so great.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's really great to see him pop up in these high profile roles.
Yeah. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Robert Downey Jr.
Yes.
Absolutely adore. First of all, great performance, just full stop, great performance. Maybe like award nomination worthy. What is so great about it is the casting, because we have had Robert Downey Jr. on this Iron Man pedestal for the last decade. He has been kind of not the quintessential, but he has been such a hero. Yeah, especially the last handful of years with the end of MCU. That storyline, the Avengers storyline.
Yeah, I love how much of a slight like Freudian slip that is, since I don't think the MCU has really risen above Endgame. So or ever will probably. Yeah,
but yeah, he's on this just such a high pedestal at the moment, and to cast him as basically like a villain, I was like, that's just fantastic. I loved that, and he played the part beautifully. I have him in my head as Iron Man, as Tony Stark, and he's this magnanimous, smartass kind of guy, but also a hero, and that didn't detract from the Strauss character at all. Yeah, so,
yeah, absolutely. And it takes so long to really get to that point in the movie, but once it's kind of fleshed out, at least for me, it's a lot. He really nails that performance. Like there's a moment toward the end where we'll talk about it in spoilers, of course, but it's like it's flashing back and forth between Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr. and it's this intense scene. And one of the things I neglected to mention, I have not spoken these words, but I feel like there is I did say this in the Patreon recording, but anyway, in the immediate reaction on Patreon, but I feel like in my brain, there are different styles of Christopher Nolan movies. Like there's, the kind of character-based kind of turncoat or manipulative stuff like Following, Memento, and The Prestige, like that kind of like that magic trick kind of thing in terms of intentions. Then there's like the kind of more outright sci-fi stuff like Interstellar, Inception, Tenet, and then you have obviously the Dark Knight trilogy. You have all of these things, but when it comes to, in my mind, granted I haven't rewatched Dunkirk since the theater, but when you have Dunkirk and now Oppenheimer, I feel like, and this is going to sound like a joke, but I'm being completely sincere when I say this, I feel like these two movies are like Christopher Nolan's like ultimate dad movie titles, because they're dad movies. They're like, oh yeah, let's watch this historical epic about the miracle at Dunkirk and everything, and let's watch this, and then now let's watch this 3-hour examination of the man who created the atomic bomb, and like let's do that. Like this is Chris Nolan in his dad movie era, and I'm here for it.
Totally.
Yeah, I think it's it's incredibly impressive, honestly. I don't know if I started at a point and then I veered off from it and didn't circle back, but I like Chris Nolan's dad movies.
That's funny. I hadn't considered that, but that's a great way to put it. Dad movie.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I wonder what he's got rolling around in that head for the next one. Yeah,
I'm very curious what he does next.
I know he wants to do a Bond movie, a James Bond movie.
I
don't know if that'll happen. I mean,
I don't know.
I'd be game for it. I feel like Sam Mendes has he done 4? The last 4? Did he do?
No. I know he did Skyfall.
He did at least 2, right? I want to say Sam Mendes did at least 2 of them.
That sounds right. Sam.
I feel like Christopher Nolan and Sam Mendes are kind of similar filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
Not that they're, super comparable, but sort of comparable. I mean,
yeah,
just in their styles, anyways, is what I mean. So I don't know that if bringing Christopher Nolan into the Bond universe, James Bond universe, would be a very big stylistic departure from the kind of Sam Mendes era that the Bond franchise is in right now.
That's
Sam Mendes
did. Point.
I don't even remember what the last one was called. The last Daniel Craig one that came out a couple of years ago. I don't think he did, because I don't think Sam Mendes did that one.
No, Sam Mendes did Skyfall and Spectre.
Okay.
And then who did? I think Cary Fukunaga did the last one, which I can't even remember the name. No Time to Die.
That's right. I didn't like it really.
I didn't even see it.
It was okay.
Okay. That was Cary Fukunaga. I haven't seen the last 2 Bond movies. But it's interesting. I don't know that it would be interesting. I would be shocked if Nolan signed on for a Bond movie. Because I feel like he's already done his franchise thing. He did the Dark Knight trilogy. He did it his way. Not to say that he would do something different, and not to say he wouldn't do something different with Bond, but I feel like he's already done that kind of, if not like studio heavy, like franchise thing. It's something that has like a long running IP behind it and everything. And I don't know if that's something I would be surprised if he would be interested in that, especially since I feel like he's maybe already scratched that itch with Inception and Tenet.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah. I know he's mentioned that in the past that he'd like to do a Bond movie, but maybe like you said, maybe he scratched that itch already. So
yeah. But speaking of scratching itches, should we scratch on over to the spoiler section?
That's a labored transition there, but yeah, sure.
It really is. Okay, cool. So before we do that, what is your rating for this movie on Letterboxd, and where can people find you on Letterboxd, Tiny?
I actually didn't. I wasn't sure because it was the press screening. I wasn't sure if we could actually post that yet.
Yeah.
But,
we're good. The embargo for everything lifted.
Okay. It's going to be 4.5 stars
Nice.
for me. It is. This doesn't necessarily mean as much as it might sound like, but it's my favorite movie of the year so far.
Nice.
I've seen like 4 movies that came out this year, so it's not really saying a lot. But I mean, it's gonna be on my top 10 for sure.
Mhm.
That's like guaranteed. I mean, it is a tour de force, totally tour de force. Cillian Murphy's amazing. The rest of the cast is amazing, and I mean, it might be one of the better scripts I've ever seen on film. Like, I love the writing of the movie, and it's just paced well. I once the structure found its groove, it's magnificent. It's just a really, really well made movie all around.
Nice, well said. And where would you rank it in Christopher Nolan's body of work?
Man, that is...
I know.
I'd really have to think about that. I'd say it's towards... It's in the top half. I don't know that it's better than Inception or Interstellar for me, or Dark Knight. But it's better than Batman Begins. It's better than Insomnia. I'd say it's top half, but it's sort of in the middle, I guess, is what I'd say. But
nice.
Scripts, as far as scripts go, I think it's his best script he's ever written. So
yeah, I'll definitely agree with that. And Letterboxd, where can they find you?
At Obsessive Tiny, I think.
Yep, you got it. Okay. For me, I rated this 4.5 stars. Once again, I wrote a review. It's on obsessiveviewer.com. Link in the show notes. Show notes can be found at obsessiveviewer.com/OV394. And in terms of where I would rank it, I mean, this is going to be in my top 5 probably. Well, it'll be in my top 10 for sure for the year. Maybe top 5. I'm very, very fortunate that I've had 4.5 stars movies so far this year. So it's been a very good year so far. In terms of Nolan's body of work, I need to revisit some things because Memento was kind of life-changing for me. Because when we watched that when we were teenagers, like that just blew my mind. But weirdly enough, like on Letterboxd, I have it rated at 4 stars, and I feel like that is a disservice. Like that's a 4.5 or 5-star movie for me. So pending that rewatch, I would put Oppenheimer slightly, like I would put it tied with Memento, and I would have The Dark Knight and Inception in the top 2. Ask me which one is which at any given time. I'll give you the opposite answer because they're both just so good for me. So that's where I would rank it, probably tied for 3rd with Memento. Okay. Yeah. But let's go into spoilers for Oppenheimer. We're going to play a clip from the trailer, and then when we come back, we're going to be spoiling Oppenheimer. So be warned, go check it out. Go see it in the theater. If you're in Indianapolis or in an area that has the capabilities of seeing it in true IMAX on 70 millimeter, go watch that because that's an amazing experience. Yeah, so check that out. I'm going to play a clip from the trailer, and when we come back, we're going to be spoiling Oppenheimer.
Let's go recruit some scientists.
Build a town, build it fast. If we don't let scientists bring their families, we'll never get the best.
Why would we go to the middle of nowhere for who knows how long?
Why? Why? How about because this is the most important thing to ever happen in the history of the world?
You're the great improviser, but this you can't do in your head.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world?
Chances are near zero.
Near zero.
What do you want for theory alone?
0 would be nice.
This is a matter of life and death. But I can perform this miracle.
Okay, spoilers on for Oppenheimer. So, Tiny, I want to open this discussion with a stupid tweet that I tweeted. That is not that I was proud of it, but also my sense of humor. It's not very funny. But the tweet was just a very dumb tweet. I'm going to, this is so dumb. I'm so sorry, everyone. But the tweet was, the part in Oppenheimer where they test the bomb and it transports Oppenheimer to 2023, where he starts an OnlyFans under the name J. Robert Thottenheimer, is a really bold choice by Nolan, and I'm really not sure if audiences are going to like it. So let's go ahead and go into spoilers for Thottenheimer. What did you think in a more open discussion? We can kind of touch on the Florence Pugh of it all to start out if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. And one thing about her character that and about the movie in general, I was kind of surprised at the use of the nudity in this movie, because we see a lot of Pew boob here, and I mean, obviously, I'm a fan of boobs, I like to see boobs, but I don't know, maybe it's just as I'm getting older, I very rarely see a nudity in a movie where I'm that makes creative sense. I feel I just feel it doesn't. It's so seldom is useful in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the purpose of it was in this movie. There's an early sex scene, and that's fine. I have no issue with the little boobage in there, but there's just other parts where it feels like she's just on display, and I know she's Florence Pugh as a person in real life is very big on the free the nipple thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cool, and maybe that's why she wanted to do that, or maybe that's why it's in the movie. I have no idea, but I just feel like it doesn't add anything to the movie, and it just always feels exploitative to me. And I don't, again, love boobs, but it's just I don't. I feel like creatively it's a distraction, and it's not a creative choice to me most of the time.
It's a really interesting choice to have her be kind of, if not outwardly objectified, but then just have her be kind of, like you said, on display. And I feel like there's probably some rhyme to the reason of that. I know that there was a lot of press built up about it being oh, Christopher Nolan has sex scenes in this movie now. That's something we haven't seen in a Christopher Nolan movie. We've gotten a little bit of that in the Dark Knight Rises. And that's pretty much it that I can think of.
Right.
Right. And I know there was a lot of kind of funny takes online. I think one was this might not even, I don't even know if this was a funny take or if it was a sincere criticism of the movie or not, but it's I don't think Christopher Nolan understands what sex is. Which the nudity and the sex scenes, they worked, it was fine. And it is pertinent to the evolution of the plot, I will say that. But it's also emblematic of some of the issues I have with it. And by that I mean that one of the few scenes we get of Florence Pugh is in the kind of closed door hearing that Oppenheimer is in when they're talking about the affair. And they're talking about it, and this is all going on the record and everything. And Kitty, his wife, is seated behind him. I think visually that is a very evocative scene because you see her just reacting to the information that she has, that she's known about, but having it be a part of public record and everything, it is weighing on her. And then the scene transitions to having this this visual aid of Oppenheimer and Jean, played by Florence Pugh, naked, and her straddling him, and her just gazing into the soul of Emily Blunt. And that as an artistic choice is really interesting and captivating. But it's
that I liked.
Yeah.
I liked that part, but I liked that part because it was effective, and it showed a psychological, visceral thing. And I don't have an issue with sex scenes necessarily, but it's the nudity. There's the part where they have their affair, the the hookup, and she's just sitting in the chair topless. That's why I'm like, why does she?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just, like I said, just felt like she was on display.
Yeah, like when he goes back to visit her. Is that what you're talking about? Where they're both seated across from each other?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely, I agree. But I also feel like the justification of that is that this is a flashback from the perspective of it being read in this setting. So I think that it is intentional that she's on display, because this is being dictated to the room with Emily Blunt present, and the visual aspect of that, of flashing back to this description, is effectively a metaphor for how naked Oppenheimer's personal life is in this open setting.
Okay, I hadn't considered that. That's a really good take on that.
That's my justification of it, but who knows? It could just be that Nolan was like, okay, well, let's do some more nudity here. Who knows?
you might be right. That's a really good take.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, good job on that.
Because honestly, I think of the like 4 or 5 scenes that Florence Pugh is in, it's probably more than that, but I think the only ones where she's clothed are her introductory scene at the party, and the scene, her death scene, but also her scene with Oppenheimer, where he is telling her that, yeah, I'm with Kitty, we're going to get married, she's pregnant, this has to end. And that, I think, well, there's other scenes, but like those are the standout scenes where she's clothed.
Right.
And I think that there's a kind of there's a dichotomy to that I think is I think that there is something to that, but I haven't really worked it out exactly. The other big thing that I had with that subplot was the death scene. Did it look like someone was pushing her head down? Or did I imagine that?
Yeah, and that I don't have an issue with that, but I think it could have been, like, this was an R rating. Like, this is an R movie. There's no need to hold back on a depiction of suicide. Like, it was very quick cut, like a lot of quick cuts and strange angles or strange zooms, I guess, from the camera. And I don't know that was necessary. I would have appreciated, I think it would have been a little more poignant and effective if it would have been a more straightforward filming of her committing suicide.
Absolutely. And less ambiguous, because it just felt it felt like a disservice to the character and that story overall, because like you said, it's a lot of quick cuts, very brief stuff, and we do get the fallout of that, no pun intended, but we get the fallout of that with Oppenheimer reacting to it, and then Kitty like basically whipping him into shape and being like, you don't get to be sinful and also gain our sympathy because of the outcome of what happened or whatever. But I think that in the moment where we have this character who is dying, I feel like it is a disservice to that subplot and that character to have it depicted in the same stylistic way as the rush of backstory in the opening scenes of the movie. Like, very quick cuts, very ambiguous, very kind of confusing there. Because there was a moment where I thought that there was like a gloved hand that was behind her, like pressing her down. And I thought, like, is the implication that they murdered her? But that didn't really go anywhere, and it just kind of felt a little bit off to me.
Yeah, that was strange.
Yeah.
One other thing in spoilers that I kind of wanted to talk about is I really enjoyed the depiction of the dichotomy, I guess, that Oppenheimer sort of suffers throughout the movie, where I feel like it's almost best exemplified in the third act towards the conclusion, where he's being in the Gray hearing where he's being absolutely lambasted by the Roger Robb character. And he's like, his finger in his face, right up in him, yelling at him. Tempers are flared, and he's questioning him on his opinion on the morals of what he did and all that stuff. And I feel like Oppenheimer was able to separate his emotions and his morality from the practicality of what needed to happen. Like, I think he, and I haven't read up on his opinions. I'm not well read on his life and how his public opinions. I'm not well read on it, but essentially I know that he sort of spoke out against, nuclear weapon advancement after World War II and all that stuff. And I just feel like in the film, his character so clearly has this dichotomy of, we have to build this bomb because if we don't, someone else will and will use it against us. And we have to, there's a really great line where he says something along the line. I think it's where all the scientists at Los Alamos get together to debate, after Germany surrenders and all that, they're like, do we even need to keep going and make this bomb? And he says something along the lines of, they won't they won't understand it until we use it, and we have to use it. So I can't remember exactly what the line is. I wish I should have looked it up, but it's a fantastic line, and I feel like it again, that exemplifies how he has a moral objection to using these weapons, but we didn't have a choice in World War II. We had to use it, and it's like, he's so smart that to him that's obvious, but for someone like Roger Robb or Senator Robb who's trying to use it against him, he either doesn't get it or he doesn't, he's trying to use it against him. And I appreciate it throughout the entire movie how he's such a complex character. Robert Oppenheimer in real life was such a complex person, but it was also simple to him. He was like, I think communism is interesting, but I'm not a member of the party. Like, I just find it fascinating, and I'm curious, and I think it has some uses in this world, and it's a fascinating thing to study and think about and explore. But that doesn't mean I'm a communist. That doesn't mean I'm a spy and trading secrets to Russia and all that. And it's so obvious to him, and I think it's obvious to other people, but I love how that was depicted throughout the whole movie. And because he was obviously a very conflicted man, and that's that conflict, along with all the other conflicts in the movie, is always at center stage, and that's, again, can be chalked up to the fantastic writing of Chris Nolan. So
absolutely. And the quote, I believe, is they won't fear it until they understand it, and they won't understand it until they've used it.
That's it. Thank you.
And there's another quote where he says, I don't know if we can be trusted with such a weapon, but I know the Nazis can't.
Right.
Which also stood out. But yeah, it's a very complex character study, and I love the movie for that, for sure. In regards to that escalation thing, the kind of main focus of the movie, if there is one singular main focus, is Oppenheimer reckoning with the power that he has facilitated and the pain and the suffering that it could cause, and the very real possibility that it could be the end of humankind, like that it could put an end to the world as we know it. And that, I think, is really handled extraordinarily well, especially in those little like snippets of like being put into his perspective, those shots of those like atom smashing scenes. And the did we already talk about the big scene where he was speaking in front of all the people after the bomb?
We didn't know.
Yeah,
but I love the visuals of that.
Yeah, I put in my review that it's not only the best scene of the movie for me, but it is one of the best the best scenes that Christopher Nolan has put to film in his career. Like, it was stunning to me, absolutely stunning. And there is just this level of fear that is fear and desolation, really, to the psyche of Oppenheimer, that throughout the movie he is just battling the implications of what he has facilitated, what he's done, what is possible, and everything. And that is, I mean, that's the button of the movie, is the reveal of what he said to Einstein, which we'll talk about that. But just to have that slowly unravel into the point where he has like a couple of scenes where he is just experiencing like the effects of his, like, that visual representation of experiencing that anxiety, that fear, that palpable just anxiety that he feels about everything, be just showcased to us through the perspective of him speaking in front of everyone, saying very naturally, like, these like big platitudes about how, like, oh, I would just wish that we could have used it against the Germans and everything. And then all the while he's seeing the destruction at, like, that whole like cacophony of visuals and sound was just like, my jaw was on the floor. I thought that the violent imagery of it, the horror of it, and the way that just really put such a strong point to Oppenheimer's like mental anguish over the whole thing was just, it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
I fully agree. One of my favorite parts of that scene is the audio.
Yes.
Just the dropping in and dropping out of the cheers and the stomping feet, and obviously in IMAX it's going to be amazing because there's like 100 speakers in there. But one of my favorite parts is there's like this it's sort of subtle. There's like a woman screaming. It's kind of dropped in like a single scream from a woman, and it's like I don't know. It's like it was mixed in with cheers. And I need to see it again to really nail it down, but it stuck with me when I saw that. That scene was, I agree. I think it's one of the best things he's ever put to film. I agree. That was incredible.
Absolutely. And then also, I know there were other things I wanted to talk about, but I can't remember off the top of my head now, but we should talk about the testing scene. The big kind of set piece of the movie is the atomic bomb test, and like the visual aspect of that, the audio of it is, I mean, that was something else. How did you feel about the way that was depicted?
I loved everything about it. Again, amazing audio in that scene. I loved everything about it except the actual explosion. Like, interesting. I know he has such a. I mean, these like the slow motion flames and everything are great. All the light, the intense light, like that's so good. But like, it didn't seem big enough. Like, I mean, this is, that's why. Like, he's so, like, Christopher Nolan is so dedicated to practical filmmaking, which I love. But this is a situation where CGI could have really amplified that scene, in my opinion. If we had seen or if they had shown us a well depicted mushroom cloud and given us a larger, like a larger wide angle shot of that explosion in CGI, because obviously practically you can't even get close to a nuclear detonation. Right. I don't care, I mean, within the rules of law, I'm sure they're hamstrung in a certain way if they were like, hey, can we get these explosives, and the FBI would drop in at some point. I don't know, but there's only so much you can do practically, and I just wish that's the one time where I was like, bring in some CGI, man. I think it could have increased. I think it could have increased the amplitude of that scene to have a true like CGI. Just the explosion, like the actual fireball, mushroom cloud. You can't create that practically. That has to be done with CGI. And again, they did a good job, and every other thing about that scene is insanely good. And like it's an A. They scored and they're getting graded an A on that scene. But what would have put it over the top would have been a better depiction of the actual like fireball explosion, in my opinion, with some more like wide shots showing that to us. That's my opinion. Maybe maybe other people felt differently, and I'm sure you did. But yeah, I'm curious how you felt about it and what all details jumped out to you.
You know, that's really interesting because I didn't have any kind of qualms with it. And I know that you didn't necessarily have qualms with it or anything, but I didn't really think about it. I did notice that it is the actual fireball, the mushroom cloud effect of it was different from like what I conventionally think of as an atomic bomb detonation from years of watching movies and everything. And I'm curious to know how close that is to actually replicating the look of an actual atomic bomb blast. And maybe, I don't know how, because I'd be curious to know. But I definitely understand what you're saying, that it could have been enhanced, especially to show the absolute magnitude of it.
Right.
But the sound design of that, the delay of sound and the way that it is so propulsive. It's deafening. That was remarkable to me.
And the weaving of the separate perspectives of the scientists who were watching it from different vantage points was great editing and super effective.
Oh yeah. Also the I lost my train of thought. I do have another point that I want to bring up kind of about that. But the thing that I wanted to touch on in spoilers about kind of going way back, and this can just be a brief thing because I don't know the actual true story. I don't know what exactly happened with the character that, or with the woman that Florence Pugh is doing, but I just remembered that I forgot to bring up how slightly comical, I don't know if I want to say comical, but how interesting it is that Christopher Nolan, for as much as I love the guy's work and everything, just about every movie has to have the like fridging the wife scene where a vast majority of male characters at the center of a Christopher Nolan movie are brought, like they're basically like they're propelled into whatever the narrative is by the death of their spouse. And it's like throughout most of his movies and everything. And that's kind of a comical kind of thing to point out and everything. And it's just like when it was being reported that there was going to be a lot of nudity with Florence Pugh and Cillian Murphy, I kind of made like the kind of snarky joke that like, oh, okay, well that means that like this is the first Christopher Nolan movie that has like actual like nudity and sex scenes and everything. So that means that, you know, Oppenheimer is going to have sex before Christopher Nolan just kills off his love interest. And I said that not knowing the story and not knowing what was going to happen and everything. And I was just like, he still did it. That's interesting. But yeah, I don't know. That's just a weird observation. But the other thing I wanted to talk about in regards to the depiction of the bomb and also the absence of depictions of war is I feel like there is a level of, in as far as can be demonstrated in this particular movie, there is a certain level of restraint or even respect given to the loss of life in the blasts in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, in that we don't see it on screen. We don't see them dropping the bombs. We don't see anything. And it's even evident in the scene where Oppenheimer is in that like place where they're going over the casualty reports and everything and showing slides and showing footage and everything. And the camera is just focused in on Oppenheimer, on his reactions, him learning this. And it's not like a much lesser filmmaker would have probably not thought through that to that extent, that it would have to be a physical representation. It would have to be a visual representation to show the horror of it. But instead, he's trusting his actor. He's trusting that he can communicate the absolute, unconscionable, insane level of loss and horror that was, responsible for, by focusing it on Cillian Murphy and trusting him to carry the weight of what's being said on screen. And I just thought that was just a really elegant touch by Christopher Nolan. And Cillian Murphy, just I have loved that man for decades at this point. And I'm just so happy to see him in such a big starring role, especially for Christopher Nolan. And I love Cillian Murphy, and I think he did a phenomenal job.
I agree. I on your first point, I think a lesser filmmaker would have overdone that scene, and I think a lesser actor would have overacted it.
Yeah.
I feel like it was really effective, and I don't know if tasteful is the right word, but I don't know. I don't know that the tone of this movie was about admonishing the existence of this weapon and the production of this weapon and the use of this weapon. I don't think that's what this movie was about. So I don't know that. I think some people might criticize that scene for not showing the projections and the photos or whatever that they were looking at as a way to protect the audience or something, or make it less harsh. I think people might criticize it for that, but I don't, because again, I just don't think that was in line with the tone of the movie, right? And what the movie was trying to achieve overall. It was about his reaction and about how he responded to it. So I love that scene, and fully agree. Cillian Murphy. I mean, I feel like he's a shoo-in for an Oscar nomination for this.
Absolutely.
If he doesn't get it, I'll be furious.
Same.
Yeah, he was magnificent. And one thing that surprised me a bit is I think Cillian Murphy went through a decent physical transformation for this. He is rail thin in this movie. Yeah. I mean, he's always been a real skinny guy, but I mean, he looks peaked throughout a majority of the movie. So, yeah, I was a little surprised by that.
He definitely has a very a slight physical presence there. Also, when you said peaked, I just thought it's Peaked Blinders. But which I've never seen Peaky Blinders, but I know that's been his thing for years now. To the point about the depiction and everything, I do really commend the movie for really diving into, while avoiding the devastation and having that be even a well-meaning director could have made that be incidentally gratuitous by showing it in an effort to not to capitalize on showing this devastation as disaster porn, but showing it as a means to show this is what human beings did to one another. This is what happened, and this is why he's carrying this weight of destruction and everything on his shoulders and everything. Instead of doing that, what Nolan does is there are a few scenes where to highlight and showcase how absolutely dangerous it is for nuclear arms to escalate over the years following the Manhattan Project. He shows the disconnect between what happened and with the people in power who are not carrying the necessary weight of that responsibility. Case in point being like when they're selecting the targets, and I can't remember who it was. Was it a secretary? I don't know. But when he was like he's like, okay, what about these two? Oh, not Kyoto, because me and my wife honeymoon there. And then like in the scene with Truman, who by the way was Gary Oldman. That was surprising. That was awesome. But like him just being like, hey, you know, no one gives a shit that you made the bomb. I'm the one who dropped it. And like he does it in this way that's like he kind of condescendingly hands him his handkerchief and is just like, you know, cry about it and everything. It's like, dude, like read the room, bro.
Right.
Yeah. But we can start kind of wrapping up here soon, because I know that we've gone over the time and everything. But I did want to kind of share some thoughts about the ending. First of all, and we can circle back to this if you want to, but to kind of get it all out there, the scene where it flashes back and forth between Oppenheimer and Strauss as they're kind of at the end of their respective timelines, and Strauss is talking about how Oppenheimer, like he's basically presenting what humankind and what America views Oppenheimer as Oppenheimer is giving like his depiction of, or like his account of what, like how he feels. And I think that the way that it juxtaposes that in this cross-cutting scene where these two actors are not speaking to one another, but they are speaking passionately in defense of their own perspectives and how that relates to the greater narrative. I think that is an astonishingly well-written and well-performed, like, dramatic climax of the movie. It is incredible to me. And like I said, we can kind of circle back to that in a second, but I do want to just briefly mention the ending, where it's the reveal of like what Einstein said and what Oppenheimer said to Einstein, and Oppenheimer saying, like, you asked if, like, I'd asked you if we were potentially going to, you know, destroy the world, and my answer is I think we did. And like that is such an amazing closing line, having it focus on Oppenheimer's face as we cut to credits and everything. That works incredibly well. It is an amazing button on it. However, and this is a nitpick to end all nitpicks, I feel like the structure of that ending, the way that plays out, is something that we have seen time and time and time again in Christopher Nolan movies. Like, it is like his go-to template for how to end a movie, like having all of these things converge and then have like an ominous like scene that's like kind of prominent, and say like, you know, and then end on one final thing and then title card. And it's like, we saw it with Matthew McConaughey going back to the ship in Interstellar. We saw it with the spinning top in Inception. We saw it in The Dark Knight Rises with Joseph Gordon-Levitt rising up in the Batcave. We saw it with Batman Begins with the whole here's the card for the Joker and everything, and you'll never have to say thank you. It's just like, it just seems like structurally it's the same type of ending in so many of his movies, and like it is such a weird, and I don't know if that's a valid criticism or anything, because it works every time. Like it is effective, and here it is potentially most effective, but it still is that same template, and it's a little weird. It kind of reminds me a little bit on a very light level of the Aaron Paul gif from Breaking Bad, where it's like, he can't keep getting away with this. But I don't know. So
that's funny.
Yeah, I don't know. About those 2 points, do you have anything, or am I completely off my rocker?
Yeah. The first point about the structure of the ending leading up to the actual final line, I fully agree. That is an amazing piece of structure, and just writing. The weaving of those two stories is great. Also, it's amazing how few scenes Oppenheimer and Strauss actually share together.
Absolutely.
Being that they're antagonists of one another, that's really incredible. But what you said about Christopher Nolan's final scenes in movies, you're not wrong, but I feel like what you're I feel like what you're describing is a crescendo.
Yeah,
which is a natural ending. Like, and he does use it. It's in different formats, like you said, the spinning top in Inception, and it's not always just like a quippy line. It's a spinning top, or it's let's see, I'm trying to think of some other ones. Memento kind of has something like that as well.
Yeah.
A line like that. But like I said, I feel like if you, again, you didn't say it was necessarily a criticism, but
right.
It's a maybe a ploy would be a proper term for it. But I've never thought of that since you just mentioning that is the first time I've ever thought about it. But again, I feel like that what you're describing is a crescendo in film form, and the greatest symphonies of all time all use crescendos, and like it's just, I don't know, like I feel like it's appropriate, but it is I know you've used the term before regarding Christopher Nolan that he has a bag of tricks.
Yeah,
he draws from a bag of tricks, and that's one of his favorite tricks. So
yeah,
and I agree that that is a valid criticism, but I don't. It doesn't bother me. I'll put it that way. Yeah, and I feel like he uses it so well that I don't know why he would do anything else. I guess.
To be clear, it doesn't necessarily bother me. It's just it's more that I see the pattern in his work to use that same style, like that same structure, that same crescendo effect. But in part of me is like, most of these, maybe it's just a natural byproduct of making a nonlinear story, like telling a nonlinear story, having all of these things dovetail together and then having it cross-cut with each other, having multiple timelines end in the same moment and then end on one provocative shot and then credits. Like, I get that for sure. But, I also just feel, I think it's just mostly just that I see the pattern and that's bothering me just slightly, even though it's effective. And also just the fact that this is like, I can understand that and align with that as a staple in his work. But I kind of feel like this being nonfiction, this being a biopic about a real person, real events, and then technically I guess Dunkirk is the same way, but with this, it just kind of feels like it's not even that it lessens the overall narrative and the theme and everything, but it just feels like, given that this is a different type of story than what we're used to from him, I kind of expected something a little bit different as the final button on the movie. But yeah. I say all that having not had a problem with the ending, with that end sequence. Like, I think that it ends on the appropriate note, and the final shot of his face as we are given that information of what he said to Einstein, it's like, that's perfect. Like, that is the perfect encapsulation of everything that this movie is saying. And it's just weird that it's the same template, I guess. I don't know. So yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So anything else on Oppenheimer?
I don't think so. I feel like there's so many other things we could talk about, but yeah, just suffice to say it was fantastic.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing it again. I definitely want to see it. I want to see it in Dolby. So I might see it this weekend. I'm not sure, but very excited nonetheless. I'm very glad to be very excited about a Christopher Nolan movie. It's a great feeling. So
awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So let's wind down once again. Ratings, 4.5 stars for me. Still 4.5 stars for you, Tiny.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So once again, I don't think we're going to do like a potpourri section or anything because it is late. So we're going to end this episode now. Once again, check out all of our work. Check out obsessiveviewer.com. Check out the podcasts, the one you're listening to. Also Anthology, where I talk about the Twilight Zone as a first-time viewer and other sci-fi anthology storytelling and stories and series and everything. I'm about to do a deep dive into season 6 of Black Mirror. Is it season 6 or 5? 6, I think.
I think it's 6.
Yeah, it's season 6. And then also, if you're in a giving mood and want so much more content, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. A whole bunch of different tiers that each one has like a wealth of audio content. I post there. If I go more than a few days without posting a Patreon thing, I feel like there would be a missing persons report made because I'm always posting on that damn Patreon. But check that out. Yeah, I'm proud of it. I really like doing it.
You should be.
Thank you. And then also check out TikTok for all of my crazy dance. I don't dance on TikTok. I just do book reviews and movie and TV thoughts and everything. So okay.
I love that stitch you made. That was funny. Like I
was really proud of
LOL'd. That was funny as shit. Like, yeah.
I was really proud of that. Like, yeah. I'll put a link in the show notes if I can remember to. But anyway, or just check out TikTok, OV podcasts on TikTok. But anyway, Tiny, as always, it has been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, I don't know what we're going to do next time on the show, but very glad that we have this outlet to talk movies and everything. So, okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, man.
Hell yeah. Of course. So I'm going to go ahead and start playing us out. Yeah, let us know what you thought about Oppenheimer. You can send an email at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. Reach us on Twitter, Obsessive Viewer. Also on Threads, Obsessive Viewer, the new whatever. Instagram, all the social medias. But anyway, thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. And now, enjoy this short clip from our Patreon exclusive RSS feed. For the full clip and more exclusive Patreon content, such as early access to episodes, TV, book, and movie reviews and reaction recordings, commentary tracks, and Patreon potpourri episodes, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at the minimum rate of $1 per month. Thank you and enjoy. So that's kind of a little bit of a personal kind of preference that I have, or a personal reaction that I'm having to this season. But the ways that relationship and those themes are explored in Maisie Day are still pretty fresh and unique and interesting. It kind of delves into this whole idea of privacy and the need for privacy and the greed for the greed of people to take away that privacy and the lack of humanity expressed in that kind of reveal, oh God, what's the word I'm looking for? Like that breach of privacy.
This podcast was edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find links to all of our shows at ObsessiveViewer.com/podcasts. For exclusive bonus content, including reviews, commentaries, and B-roll episodes, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.